Part 22. Panama Hotel, 11:52 a.m. A knife slit of hot sun fell across the Terminator's back as it sat on the bed, considering options. Automatic heat diffusers shunted off the excess thermal energy as the machine's brain electronically communed with itself. The probability of locating the target at the address the cyborg analysed as the mother of Sarah Connor was high enough to initiate an attack run. Methodically, the Terminator gathered up the tools required. There weren't many left. At the conclusion of this run, if it was negative, the cyborg would have to relocate the base of operations. Oceanside, 1:23 p.m. Sarah and Reese stepped down from the semi's cab after thanking the burly driver. As the truck thundered away, Sarah tugged Reese towards the Tiki Motel, across the street. It looked paperboard sleazy, the flat roof bordered in broken neon tubing, the entire structure leaning to one side. But it had beds. And showers. As they approached the place, Reese gazed at the uniformed Marines strolling down the street in groups, out for a cruise away from Camp Pendleton, just north of town. He was struck with envy at the pristine uniforms, but amazed at the softness in the young faces. Their warriors were like civilians, he thought, careless and unconcerned as they sauntered in the clear and open daylight. It still seemed incredible to him. "Come on, Kyle," Sarah urged. The motel office had been boarded up and converted into a cinema-style box office for security reasons. Oceanside had a lovely view of the Pacific, plenty of sun, and a high crime rate. The bedraggled pair stepped up to a grill with a slit-like opening. Reese dug in his pockets and pulled out a knotted wad of dirty paper money. "Is this enough?" he asked her. "Yes," Sarah exclaimed. "And I don't want to know where you got it." She extracted the required amount to cover the overnight rate and spoke into the grill. "We need a room, with a kitchen," Reese added. While Sarah dealt with the board manager, Reese turned his attention to a large, dusty German shepherd tethered by a chain to a weathered doghouse almost alongside the office. It had just finished slurping water from its bowl. Reese caught its eyes. The animal was old, maybe 10 years, but Reese could still detect a muted spark of fight behind the now limpid brown eyes. Reese slowly approached, extending his hand. The dog hesitated only briefly, then got up and met Reese halfway. It licked his hand affectionately. He had cleared canine check, again. Old habits. He relaxed a bit, subconsciously feeling more secure with a dog around. A few moments later, they entered the Spartan room that they had been assigned. There was a bed, a dresser, a tiny kitchen alcove, and a bathroom. Sarah could see the rust-stained tiles of the shower through the door. It wasn't the Waldorf. It was just heaven. Reese prowled, fussily, checking the place out with practiced efficiency. To him, the comfort factor was less important than the placement of the window, which affected line of sight and line of fire, or the thickness of the walls. Concrete block. Good, low penetration. The back door, which sported a deadbolt and an iron slide bar, also met with his approval. The sign on the door, which read, "Do not use this exit," meant nothing to the soldier. Even though the last one to paint the room had sloshed a coat all across the threshold, Reese would loosen it. Sarah collapsed on the bed and said, "I am dying for a shower." Reese glanced down at her, as if that were the least of his priorities. "I've got to go out for supplies," he announced, and started for the door. "Kyle, wait!" She had sat upright, not liking the idea of being left alone one bit. We should change your bandage." "When I get back." Then he saw the look in her face and realized what was troubling her. He walked over and tossed the .38 on the bed beside her. "I won't be long." He pivoted and got to the door fast. The sooner he took care of business, the faster he could return. Sarah watched him leave and sat in the slatted light from the blinds listening to muffled traffic. She looked down at the snub-nosed weapon. It looked brutal and threatening, although she knew from her experience with the cyborg that the gun could not stop it. Perhaps Reese left the weapon so that if the machine found her while she was gone, she could use it on herself. But no, Reese would never want that. His whole being was canted in the direction of her survival. He would want her to go on living until that right was forcibly removed. Then why leave it? It certainly didn't make her feel any better. She nudged it, tentatively, then picked it up. There was a sharp, snarly kind of oil metal smell to the weapon that made Sarah feel small and weak. But somehow it felt right in her hand. Of course, the thing was designed to feel right in a human hand. But no, there was something else, Sarah realized. And then she developed another theory about why Reese had given her the gun. He wanted her to get used to it. With a sinking feeling, she began to grasp the outer edges of something so large it completely overwhelmed any normal scale of thinking. She might have to use guns like this for the rest of her life. Reese was losing forward momentum fast. All his reserves were hitting empty, but he had to maintain maximum alertness for just a little while longer. He was walking towards a large supermarket, crossing the parking lot jammed with people and new, shiny vehicles. His mouth watered to see the magnificent interiors and the complex-looking dashes and the mission, soldier. Mission. Have to balance the scale. Upgrade defense, build a wall of firepower even the 800 couldn't break through. Reese shook his head wearily and sauntered on bruised and battered feet into the Fort Knox of food. Yeah, no sweat, Reese thought. Just one more impossible job. The shower almost washed away the residue of blood and thunder that Sarah had been carrying with her for the last dozen hours. She scrubbed herself raw with the plain white soap bar and scalded her body with steamy water. Later, sitting on the bed in a towel, her now greaseless hair still dripping globules of moisture down her back, she almost felt clean. Almost. She stretched out on the bed for a moment, just to remain still, to reduce temporarily the insistent pull of gravity, and immediately fell into a deep, black sleep. Sarah was cornered. The hulking figure of the Terminator burst through the door with a lurid, eager grin, almost lascivious in its desire, and aimed the gun at her chest. Sarah saw the miniature red sun of the aiming laser roll across her body and freeze position over her right breast. Before she could thrust herself off the bed, there was an explosion like the world erupting, and the ball of lead whistled towards her, cutting the air like a surgical knife. When it struck her body, she felt the dull snap of rib bones and was lifted up and back as if punched by a giant. She could feel the hot life pumping out of her and thought serenely that the pain was too far away to hurt her very much. And then the Terminator was standing over her and pumping bullet after bullet into her once pretty body, each one a tiny battering ram punching holes in her meat and making her flop and bounce. Then she screamed, because it was not just death happening here, but mindless, insane, and unfair mutilation. And she sat up and sucked in air to scream again, and realized it was very quiet, so she couldn't have just screamed. And that meant she hadn't screamed, and that meant she had been dreaming. When she was completely conscious, she realized two things simultaneously. It had become dark, and Reese had not yet returned. The grimy electric clock on the bedstand read 6:03. She sat up and immediately regretted it. Her muscles felt like tenderized steak, brutally abused by the hammer blows of the last 12 hours. She hadn't had nearly enough sleep to feel good. The gun was on the dresser, pointed towards the wall, drawing her eyes like a summons from the Supreme Court. "Don't like the way I look?" it seemed to say. "Tough. You and I are now partners in life. Sleep without me if you dare." Sarah shuddered and picked up the phone. A few seconds later, she was talking to her mom. "Believe me, Mom," she was saying, "there's nothing you can do to help. Just stay up there where it's safe. I can't tell you where I am. It's too dangerous." But her mother was very persistent this time. She wanted at least a number she could call in case she had to leave. Sarah wouldn't be able to get in contact with her. That was certainly true enough. "Mom, if I give you a number, you have to promise not to tell the police or anyone. I mean it. We'll probably only be here for a little while anyway. Okay. Here it is." She gave her mom the number written on the motel phone, then told her that she loved her. There was a brief hesitation, then the expected and warming answer. After Sarah hung up, she stared at the phone. All this mystery must be tearing her mother to pieces. But she had to be protected. An errant thought skipped across her mind like a stone over a pond. It didn't touch down long enough anywhere for Sarah to consider it in any way significant. But that characteristic waver in her mum's voice was gone. Big Bear, 6:04 p.m. It wasn't a big place as far as resort cabins go. Basically, there were 3 rooms. A loft bedroom connected by steep stairs to a large downstairs area split into a kitchen area and a living room. The door hung loose on its hinge like a torn ligament. On the floor, underneath an overturned chair, lay the body of Sarah's mother. The ambient temperature inside had come down in the last 10 minutes to something close to the 34 degrees outside. The blood on Mrs. Connor's head had thickened. Her sightless eyes were staring blankly up at the thing in the desk chair that had murdered her. It was holding the phone to its ear, listening. "I love you, Mum," said the voice on the other end. The Terminator hesitated for the briefest of moments, considering its options. Several verbal replies were passed over until the cyborg selected one that had the lowest factor of error that could alert the target to the digital synthesis of the voice of the battered woman at its feet. "I love you too," it said, and hung up. It did not smile as it dialed another number, nor did it look down at its recent kill. It waited with the patience of the dead until someone picked up on the other end of the line. "Tiki Motel," the voice said. Then it spoke again, this time in its own voice, precise, clean, conscienceless, and somehow devoid of any human perspective. "Give me your address there," it requested blandly. Tiki Motel, 6:27 p.m. When the man came to the door, Sarah's heart froze. He knocked once, twice more, then once again. Sarah gasped with relief and unlocked the door. She wanted to throw her arms around Reese and kiss him, but he was pushing past her towards the kitchenette before the thought fully blossomed. She locked the door again, her body rush taking its time slowing down, and faced Reese. She wanted to tell him she was glad he was back. Very glad. But he was putting 2 grocery bags on the counter and tearing them open perfunctorily. Several bottles rolled onto the stained tiles. Sarah glanced at them in confusion, reading the labels. What have we got here? Corn syrup, ammonia, mothballs. What's for dinner? Reese didn't rise to the limp attempt at humour. He was unpacking another sack filled with ammunition for the 38, road flares, tape, scissors, and a small pan with a strainer, and matches. "Plastique," he answered, distracted. "Plastique? What is it?" "Nitroglycerin, basically. Bit more stable. I learned how to make it when I was a kid." Sarah stared down at the smelly bottles and sighed. San Bernardino, 8:12 p.m. It was coming down the mountain like the Grim Reaper on a Kawasaki 900cc motorcycle. All the way it maxed the cycle to a friction breaking point, many times narrowly missing a nasty slide off the steep and winding road into the ravine far below. All this effort to intercept such a fragile, biological process as the life of one young human girl. These soft, warm, wet machines were so easy to destroy, their systems so weak. A tiny bit of tissue removed here and there, or a single heartbeat missed, was all it took. Had it been designed for emotions, or even value judgments, the Terminator might have felt some professional shame that the process was taking so long. But of course it didn't. It felt nothing, and would simply grind on indefinitely until it succeeded in its mission, or its nuclear power cell was depleted, whichever came first. And at this rate of power consumption, the cell was good for at least 20 more years. The Terminator opened the cycle throttle all the way and weaved through the light traffic on the southbound 215. Fortunately for the highway patrol, none of its officers noticed the cyborg travelling at 98 miles an hour. It was navigating a line from one death to another, crossing a sleepy desert city to the final death, the only one that mattered, the one it had been created for.